Hello, everyone. What are you guys eating today? I want to welcome you all to, and you can tell that that's the first thing on my mind. My name is Toska Medlock, and I am here with SBC 21, and we are so glad to have you here for another Lunch and Learn, an amazing treat. I want to, first of all, bring in Dr. Michael Bowie, who is the National Executive Director of SBC 21. And his Okay, I see you coming in. And so, Dr. Boyd, if you would just give us a brief greeting, and then I want to be able to allow people to come in, and then we will go ahead and introduce Pastor Olu Brown and the teaching that will happen on today. Dr. Boyd?
Yeah, thank you, Tosca. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is great seeing you all. I want to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn webinar series. And I've been hearing a lot of great things about this webinar series, and it's free, but we cover a spectrum for everything from self-care to leadership development. And we have our friend on today. He's my brother, my friend, and he's doing great things in the body of Christ. I'm so glad that Olu Brown is here to bless us with some insight, some skills, and just some wisdom on how really to be who God has called us to be. So I'm glad, Olu, you're with us today. I want to welcome you to be a part of our Lunch and Learn series. So, Tasha, I'm glad you're here and with Olu to kind of lead through this process. But guess what? I know he doesn't need any help because he's been doing a lot of great things. But it's great seeing you, my friend. And welcome everybody to SBC 21's Lunch and Learn webinar series.
So glad to see you. Now, let me tell you what I know about Olu, and I'm so glad that I'm the one that's introducing him. What I know is that, he's been in Georgia. He's been in the state of Georgia for a minute, but I do know that he's a Texan. Okay, he is a Texan, and I'm a Texan. I'm here in Dallas. Olu grew up in Lufkin, Texas. He went to Jarvis Christian College, so he got his teeth cut, not only in living in East Texas, but getting his education in East Texas. And then he made his way to Atlanta to the great divinity program at Gammon Theological Seminary over in the ITC. And so we know that he is truly educated. And what I also know is that Olu was one of SBC 21's first Academy of Intern persons. And we knew then, Dr. Allen knew then when he was an Academy of Intern individual that he was very special. And so we have been able to be with Olu in such great stages of his ministry career. He's the father of two amazing young adults. I think maybe his son is probably not a young adult just yet, but I know his daughter is. But also, he's the former lead pastor at Impact Church, and the history of that church and the start of that church under his leadership as a young congregation, birthing that church, just did an amazing thing. He founded Impact in 2007. And what he cut his teeth on while he was at Impact, all the learnings and all the best practices of what it took for Impact to grow and him developing people, developing ministries, impacting the community. He began to put all of that in books so that he can teach others and other leaders and teams on how to be as effective as God would have him to be there at Impact Church. He grew that church from 5 people or 25-person start to more than 5,000 people. And so after his retirement, he set himself on a journey to be able to be a pastor's pastor. And so that's what I love about him, because he so freely teaches. And so today we're excited because we are going to be able to hear some of his amazing teaching on how to have a 4D impact. So thank you for being here. I want you to like and subscribe to SBC 21 so that you could get more of these amazing lunch and learns that we do once a month, every third Thursday. And we would love to keep you on our mailing list so that you can hear about our next one. Yours truly would be a part of our next Lunch and Learn. So mark your calendar now for Thursday, April the 18th. But without further ado, Olu Brown, do you have a
Well,
word from the Lord?
thank you. Thank you so much, Toska, for your leadership, Dr. Bowie, for your leadership, SBC 21, Candy, who's not with us, and to each of you who are joining on. I'm here in Atlanta, and I see that you're with us from across the country. I will share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. So as we're talking about leadership, in particular in the local church, during this lunch and learn. We're focusing in on my book, 4D Impact. This book was written before COVID, but what's so amazing is a lot of leaders are locking into this book and into this resource, and it has proven to be such a great blessing. As Toska mentioned, serving in the local church for more than 20 years, I saw some things that were happening well and some things that weren't so well or going so good. And over the years, we've been able to compile some of these lessons. So this book, 4D Impact, Smashing Barriers, is written for leaders just like you. It's for leaders who are in the local church. It's for leaders who are in the parachurch, in the marketplace. It's for lay people. It's also for clergy persons, and not only here in the United States of America, but literally around the world. So the first thing that I want to remind you of is what chapter 1 focuses on, which is your new normal. And when we think about a new normal, there's this store that I grew up with called Toys R Us, and it is or was an amazing store. And I remember a few years ago, I was walking through a parking lot with my son, who was much younger then, and it said closed. And I remember being my son's age, and there was nothing better than Toys R Us. It was the place to go to. But I imagine, and this is just an anecdote, it's probably not true at all. Probably about 30 years ago or so, in the boardroom of Toys R Us, there was a board member who said, "Hey, can we add an agenda item? And there's this new company that's out in Seattle called Amazon. And I don't even know the founder's name, but it's something like Bezos, whatever." And I imagine this board member said, "Can we add to the agenda to talk about Amazon?" But you got to remember, Toys R Us was big in the game at that time. And I think someone on the board shut it down and said, "We don't need to talk about any upstart called Amazon." Now the world has shifted. What does this mean for the local church? We have these Amazon moments. We have these grassroots moments that are happening in our churches. And if we don't pay attention to them, we will literally be left behind. And so one of those new normal moments came through COVID-19. But if we're honest with ourselves, COVID-19 actually sped up some things that were already happening. So 4D Impact focuses in on how we can shift, we can evolve. And Hebrews 13:8 reminds us Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. We're not trying to change your Jesus. We're not trying to change your God, but we are saying to reach the people we're currently not reaching, we have to adjust some things in the life of our church and how we do ministry, not changing Jesus, but our approach. And here are the 4 key areas. It's technology, hospitality, it's worship, and it's also systems. And this is what I believe. It doesn't matter where you happen to be located in this world. If you focus in on these 3 things, I promise you, your church will be healthier and more vital. Technology, hospitality, worship, and systems. All right, let's talk about technology. And that's in chapter 2 of the book, 4D Impact. Here's the question, and this is a question to ask each of your leaders in your formal meetings or in the ministry areas. What is your church's technology philosophy? What is our belief about technology? Before you invest or evolve technology, the question is, what do we really believe about technology? All right, here is a picture, and if you can put it in chat, what is this a picture of? Go ahead and put it in the chat box. What is this a picture of? What is this a picture of? We're looking at chat. Let's see here who's responding to this picture. What is this a picture of? All right, I see it. Keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. All right, okay. I see. We're getting some, we're getting some right answers here. This is good. This is good stuff. All right, so the answer is this is an 8-track. And the reason it's called an 8-track is because it literally held 8 songs. If you were to grab your phone right now, and some of you are watching us on your phone, you can literally download thousands and thousands of songs. It's the same song, but it's a different format. So when it comes to the philosophy of technology of your church, if your key leaders are still in an 8-track world, you will never reach the modern current generation that has moved on to a different platform of technology. Remember, We're not changing the music. We're just changing the platforms that the music is being offered and adding additional opportunities. I showed this picture to a group that was mixed in age, and there were some younger people there, and they literally thought it was a game. They had no idea what this form of technology was. So what does that mean for your local church? If your church has a philosophy of this picture, there are younger people who don't even know who you are. And it doesn't matter how much you paid for your new sign. It doesn't matter how many banners you put up announcing it's Easter. It doesn't matter how many times you change your worship to 9:30, 10:15, 10:30. There are people who don't even know that you exist. And one of those is by accessing you through technology, such as your website, social media, etc. All right. When we talk about technology, there are two primary forms that we want to focus on. And remember, we're not doing deep dives on this stuff. This is just very surface. I hope you invest in the book and read through it, because it will take you much deeper than we can do on this Lunch and Learn. It's hardware and it's software. Your phone system in your church is technology hardware. The computer is technology hardware. The software is the email system that's run through that phone, that tablet, that computer. Or some of you have what we call church management software, how you allocate your finances, how you manage volunteers, how you do children's check-in. That's an example of technology software. So when it comes to technology, we need to be thinking about these things. We need to be doing a technology inventory. That's going to be big. How do you do it? We need to be reviewing the things that are in our technology warehouse, meaning throughout our church, hardware, software, we're constantly asking ourselves, what are our technology assets? Then when you discover there are assets you don't need, guess what you have to do? Throw it away. I can't tell you how many churches I consult and coach when I go into certain rooms that look like the reality show where people can't throw away things. Literally hallways and rooms and floors are filled with things from generations that are no longer at the church. And once you throw it away, then you have to make a decision about how we want to upgrade our technology. One of the things that I heard during COVID was a lot of leaders were able to invest in technology that before COVID, they didn't get the permission. But now finally, they were able to get a new soundboard. They were able to get projection. They were able to upgrade online. Guess what? Some churches went online for the first time. They even used technology in the form of giving. These are technology decisions that we need to consistently make. And if we don't make these decisions, guess what? There are generations of people who don't even know you exist. All right, that's the technology chapter. Chapter 3 is all about hospitality. If you were to say, oh, Luke, if you had to do your ministry all over again in the local church, what would be most important? It would be this: hospitality. But I want to take it a step further. But let's refer to a couple of scriptures. This is in the book of Acts. All the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. So even from the early initial church movement, these initial early Christians in these house churches, not these huge churches that we have now, but these communal, very small house churches, they shared everything. And so to be the church of Jesus Christ, we must lead with love. We must lead with hospitality. We must be a community that shares everything within and externally. One of my favorite theologians is Henry Nouwen, and this is one of his quotes: "Give me a share in your compassion, dear God." You know, I know there are a lot of prayers that we pray as leaders, clergy, and lay people in our local churches, but I would add this as a daily prayer when I wake up, whether you're working in corporate, whether you're working in marketplace, whether you're working in academia, or whether you're in a local church, wherever you are, every morning I would say, God, give me a share in your compassion. Who can I love? Who can I share with? Who can I give a smile to, a hug to? What can I do today that can brighten someone's day and someone's world? And here's the rub as it relates to hospitality in the local church. I think a lot of churches offer sensitivity and not hospitality. I'm going to say it again. A lot of churches offer sensitivity and not hospitality. What's the difference between the two? When a church offers sensitivity, it simply says, I accept you. I don't agree with you. I don't even want to know anything about you. You come here for an hour and a half, and when you leave, you take your world with you. That is acceptance. That's the lowest level you can offer as a church. Hospitality says, I welcome you as a being created by Almighty God. Watch, in your church, people will know if they're accepted versus welcome. And there's a difference there. I work with churches all the time, and what's happening post-COVID is churches are having to review their vision and their mission statements, because after COVID, everyone's having to ask themselves, who are we in this current season? And when I tell churches, it doesn't matter how much you put love in your vision statement. It doesn't matter how much you put serving the world in your mission statement. People will know if they're accepted versus welcome. Acceptance is the baseline. Welcome is the next level. Here's the second. When churches practice sensitivity, they're willing to overlook who you are, versus churches that practice hospitality, they want to understand who you are. As a pastor in the local church, and in particular, when my kids were much younger, it was important for me to be with them after school during their school projects and things of that sort. So my calendar was always filled with breakfast meetings and lunch meetings. So after drop off in the morning, I would go to a local breakfast spot, and I would be meeting with a member of our church or someone from the community, because I never wanted people to feel overlooked. I always wanted to take time to understand who they are. Some of you as leaders in your church are experiencing tension because you don't understand each other. If you would take the opportunity to have a discussion, not about church business, but tell me about your family. Tell me about your journey. I never will forget, there was a person on our finance team, and we always had a little tension. Great person, wonderful person, but I overlooked his career. I knew he was in insurance and finance, but it wasn't until I sought to understand his career that I finally knew what the tension was all about. Guess what? His job was to be a comptroller in a corporation. And a part of his primary role was to control the assets and regulate the assets. So every time we had a finance meeting, I was trying to release assets. He was protecting assets, and we had tension. And it wasn't until I understood who he was and how he was wired that we were able to work through it. But understanding takes time. Overlooking can happen in an instant. All right. When churches practice sensitivity, they say, I'm going to tolerate you. Oh my goodness. If you want to hurt people, simply tolerate them. The next level is love. And what's an example of that? It's Good Friday. It's a love that says, I will literally give everything for you. And guess what? Children in your church, teenagers in your church, adults in your church know the difference between being tolerated and being loved. And so it doesn't matter how many programs you offer. It doesn't matter how great your graphics. It doesn't matter how much you spend. If I come into that space in the church or beyond the church and I feel like you're just tolerating me, guess what? That's not a place that I want to hang out. And it's not a place that I want to invite my family and friends to. All right. Toska talked about how we're both from Texas. And in Texas, and in particular in the South, there's this phenomenon called Friday Night Lights, and that's high school football on Friday. And it's something I call the scouting philosophy that we see in many of our churches. So imagine there's this big high school football game on Friday night. And then after the game, everybody loads up, the football team, the coaches, the teachers, all of the squad for cheer and pep squad and the band. And they got about 4 or 5 buses, and they're going to this local restaurant. But everyone doesn't step off the bus, only the principal or the head coach. They go inside, and there's this quick conversation. Are you ready for us? Are you ready to welcome the busloads of people who really want what you have to serve? One of two things happen. One, they're ready and we welcome those folks in, or two, they're not ready and the principal or the coach gets back on the bus and they drive to another restaurant. Here's why hospitality is so important. You're never seeing the busload, you're only seeing the scout. And if you mistreat the scout, they won't wave for the busloads of people to come in. If you mistreat me, why in the world would I invite my aunt to your church so you can mistreat her? If you mistreat me, why in the world will I invite my parents? And so we never see the busloads. And that's why you have to talk to your ministry leaders who are front line. Because if you are dismissive or you're simply tolerating the scout for the community, the scout for the family, they represent the busloads of people that you will never see because they won't give them permission or invite them to come into your place. So what does this mean? Sensitivity versus hospitality. But I want to take you to a next level. We need to be offering what we call extreme hospitality. And I know some of you saying, well, Olu, I just got my head wrapped around hospitality. You're taking me to another level. That's what it's about. If you want to be serious about reaching people for Jesus Christ and keeping the people you already have for Jesus Christ, practice extreme hospitality. All people are welcome, all people are worthy, and all people have a place. Now, all people having a place doesn't mean if you have a terrible attitude, we're going to make you a greeter. We're going to find another place for you, but you do have a place here. It may not be people facing, it might not be first line of defense, but you have a place. And so if you want to take your church to the next level and see people that you only dreamt of seeing, not only in person, but also online and virtually, practice extreme hospitality. All people are welcome, all people are worthy, and all people have a place. So I know many of you are probably fans of football, and one of the interesting phenomena of football is they always have a huddle before each play. If I were leading in the local church right now, before the worship experience, and it can be that day or it can be virtually during the week, I would have a huddle. And in the huddle, not only would I tell some of the important things that are coming up so that our volunteers, and if you have staff, they know how to direct people and how to lead people, I would also go over extreme hospitality. Guess what? It's Holy Week coming up. It's Palm Sunday. It's Easter. Some of you are going to see people for the first time. And I want to tell you this, and I'm even going to write it on the screen. And that's a terrible looking number one. That's how many times you have with people. They're going to give you one time. That's it. One time. They're going to give you one time with their toddler. They're going to give you one time with their teenager. They're going to give you one time with their great grandmother. They're going to give you one time with their brother. They're going to give you one time with their sister. And so here's what I need you to know. I would be huddling our leaders up going into this Easter season, and I would be focusing on extreme hospitality. I would tell our greeters, this is what we need to be doing, and this is what we don't need to do. For people who are talking from the pulpit, maybe you're the guest facilitator that Sunday, or maybe you're the liturgist. Look, when you get to the announcement time, these are things that you need to say, and these are things you don't need to say. We'll talk about that in just a minute during systems. So it's all about extreme hospitality, but there are also different forms of hospitality. There is space hospitality, what we call the physical plant. There's marketing hospitality, and there's also worship hospitality. So let's go back to space hospitality. Some of you have buildings with steps and places that aren't accessible for individuals who have special needs. Remember, everyone counts, everyone matters. And if I have a special need or I have a challenge in mobility of some sort, guess what? If you're not prepared to receive me, it says something about your hospitality. There are two restrooms. There's a sign on one restroom for who needs to enter, and there's no sign because that fell off 5 years ago. Why didn't somebody go to Lowe's and Home Depot and buy a $2.50 sign and stick it up there so when I'm a guest and a visitor, I don't walk in a wrong room thinking this is where I'm supposed to be. And guess what? I'm not a member of the club. I have no idea that this is the purpose of the room. It's all about space, hospitality. Here's another example. And I want to say this related in particular to boys and men who go to your church. This is an image of a church where I worked previously that Toska mentioned. And I remember when we were building out this space, this is the men's restroom, one of the men's restrooms, and these are urinals. What we wanted men to know is that when they came into this space, we valued them. I can't tell you how many churches I've gone to over the years where you would go into the women's restroom area and it's like they went bankrupt by spending money on Marshalls, TJ Maxx, and Ross. And then you go to the men's restroom and it's like they just forgot that guys needed to feel love too. So in this men's restroom, we had an electric shoe shining station. On the cabinetry, we had different forms of candy as appreciation. We also had a changing station for babies because men often say, we're fine with changing the children's diapers, but typically in men's restrooms, they're not there. There was a closed circuit TV so that they could always see worship in that space. And then these televisions over the urinals would constantly play something from the culture. So if there was a football or a baseball or sports center, whatever we thought men would like, it would constantly be playing in those spaces. Now, we thought guys would just be excited about that on Sunday morning, but we utilize our building for a lot of different events, in particular for graduations. And you can't imagine how much free marketing we received because young guys would say, man, that's the church with the TV. So let's remember hospitality as it relates to space. And this is just one of those examples. But remember, there is marketing hospitality and there's also worship hospitality. And we do a breakdown of that in the book. All right. Chapter 4 is worship. And I'm going to give you some time at the end to go over some of your questions and give some feedback and even challenges. But I hope this is a blessing to you. It is worship. This is vital. Here is an image of vacuum cleaners and worship. And I think the two are similar. This is what we call a Dyson vacuum cleaner. And this is a unique brand of vacuum cleaners, so much so that when you look at the price point of Dyson vacuum cleaners, it's much higher than competitors. So if you want to get a vacuum cleaner that you can say you have a vacuum cleaner and not spend a lot, you can get this Eureka and you're going to spend about $100. Maybe you want to go a little bit higher. And so you go with this Hoover and that's about $120. Then you got a little bit more money to spend. All right, let's go with that Shark. That's about $230. Then you have a Dyson. Why in the world would someone spend between $5,000 and $1,000 for a vacuum cleaner? This is why, and this is from their company. New ideas are the lifeblood of Dyson. Every year, we invest our profits back into harnessing them at our research and development laboratory in the UK. And this is what they do. They make vacuum cleaners now. You're connecting people to eternity. These folks make vacuum cleaners and they take it so seriously. They say, we think about it, we test it, we break it, and we question it. When is the last time you thought about your worship? When is the last time you tested something different in your worship? When is the last time you were willing to break something in your worship? And when is the last time you raised vital questions? So here's what I want you to know. As it relates to worship, it's non-design worship versus design worship. What is non-design worship? It lacks a connection to the community. It uses a template always as a starting point. It's very rigid, it's very static, and it's non-response oriented. What is design worship? It's a connection to the community. It's communal and spiritual as a starting point. It's fluid and flexible. It's response oriented. So if I came to your church as a visitor in person or online, And I knew that close to your church in that neighborhood, there was a natural disaster, or there was just something just totally horrific that happened near your church. And I sat and watched online, or I was there in person. And during that entire worship experience, you never mentioned what happened in your community. I would never come to your church again because you're not connected to your community. And there are some of our worship experiences that are so rigid, that are so static, that are so template driven, that if something happens in the world, you never talk about it because there's no design and fluidity to your worship experience. When we first started our church, we were in a particular community. And because we were engaged in that community, we realized that our community in the state of Georgia had one of the highest rates of infection for HIV. And so we asked ourselves, how can we use the day when we see the highest number of people to speak to the infection rates related to HIV? And so what we decided is we would partner with the broader community, the health community, and we would invite a healthcare provider in. And after worship, people who wanted to know their status could take an instant test. And then we said, how in the world can we make this happen where people would engage in this process? And we decided to practice what Brene Brown would call vulnerability. And so that Sunday, as one of the lead pastors of the church, I stood on the stage and took an instant test to know my HIV status. And after church was over with, in addition to welcoming people to Christ, in addition to, would you like to be a part of this faith community, we had a room filled with individuals who were learning their status. Friends, that's when you choose to design worship. Yes, we are called to connect people to Christ, but you get an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours to paint a picture and take people to so many different places, because God has given you 52 opportunities a year to literally participate in community and life transformation. So one of the things that you're going to receive as a free download from this conversation, and that will be uploaded to the chat, is this recent resource that can help you lean into this Easter season to help your church grow and to think about how worship is designed. And it's a fillable PDF, and it's for free. It goes over Easter prep. It goes over post-Easter and encouraging you to do some series after Easter to get people to come back. It walks through Mother's Day. It takes you to Father's Day and right to the edge of summer. It helps you to think through some questions around what is our worship design? What are some of our facility resources? What do we need to be doing in hospitality? And you'll see the various other questions. And then as someone who helps to delegate responsibility, it also gives you a goal tracking sheet where people who are responsible for worship can list their goal, describe their goal, and they can walk through these different questions. And then if you're checking in with them, this says quarterly, you can make it weekly, you can make it daily. You can talk about what are their wins and if there are some challenges or opportunities. So hopefully that's a resource that will be helpful to you, because it's all about not having non-design worship, but rather what we call design worship. All right, here's the final chapter focus, and that is systems. Every church is made up of systems. There are people systems. There are process systems. There are technology systems. There are family systems. There are cultural systems and social systems. And so when you get a copy of the book, it will talk about some of these different systems. But the systems that I want to focus on during this part of our conversation are what we call open and closed systems. Here's the difference. An open system allows people to come in, and it also allows people to go out. A closed system says we have everyone we need, and everyone who is external can stay outside. And this isn't something we do intentionally. It happens through worship. It happens through Sunday school. It happens through volunteerism. It happens through hospitality or the lack thereof. But one of the areas where we experience closed systems the most is through what we call language. So often we've been a part of these churches for so long that we forget we're using club language, that if you've been a member of the club, you understand it. But if you're not a member of the club, you have no idea. So for instance, whenever during this Lenten season, you stand on the pulpit area or virtually, and you mention that we're in the Lenten season, those are powerful words, but those are club member words. There are people who have no idea what Lent is. And so I always encourage people who are doing the talking part of worship to quickly define these club member words. Hello, we're in the Lenten season. And Lent is that time period leading up to Easter, where we spend time in prayer, reflecting. Some people may choose to practice what we call fasting and break down fasting. Or we may practice meditation, break down meditation. Because if you don't, you're giving a closed system word, and only the people in the club are familiar with what that word is all about. Let me give you another example of a closed system that can impact your volunteerism as it relates to language. Hello, my name is Olu, and we're getting ready for Vacation Bible School. And after church, we want you to meet us in the fellowship hall. After church, we want you to meet us in the foyer. After church, we want you to meet us in one of those church words or church lingo. And guess what? There are people who want to volunteer for Vacation Bible School because they really feel called to it, but they're embarrassed to ask, what is a fellowship hall? What is a foyer? And so when you use those words, you have to break it down. The same thing happens to a lot of you who are clergy. Right before you preach, perhaps you ask people to turn to a certain page in the Bible. And I know this is going to rub some of your theology. I would be, once again, normalizing technology. And I would say, if I were up preaching, as we prepare for the message today, our scripture is from Mark chapter 3. I know some of you may have paper Bibles, and if you're like me, you got to be vulnerable. You may need to use a table of content, and that's okay, because I struggle sometimes finding the book of Mark. So you have to normalize it for people, because I've got a paper Bible. I'm sitting next to somebody who immediately flips to Mark. I need you to help me feel less embarrassed by having to turn to the table of content. Or here's another strategy. Go ahead and pull out your phones and type in Mark chapter 3 and pull it up in the digital format. So you're constantly normalizing ways so that people, watch this, who are outside of your system can feel free to step into your system. So when it comes to systems, we have to remember there are what? Open and closed systems. Here is a very quick and easy strategy as you go into this Holy Week season, and you have either printed or graphics of worship service orders or experiences. I would take the church bulletin. And some people say, I don't have a church bulletin. Well, I would take what you call the run of show, and I would look at every word, and I would ask myself, if I were outside of this system, would I know what a prelude is? Would I know what a doxology is? Would I know what an offertory song is? Would I even know what offering is? And if the answer to those questions is no, I would not, whoever has responsibility for leading those moments during that worship experience, you can't just say, this is the offertory moment. You have to explain it. Don't write a book. Don't preach a sermon. Just give me a sentence. Boom, I got it. I'm with you. Tell me what a doxology is. Boom, I got it. I'm with you. But it is to understand we all have these systems. All right. So that is a resource that I would recommend, and that's the 4D Impact. There are some other resources we've written over the years, 0 to 80 or ways that you can help strengthen a new church or existing church. Leadership Directions from Moses is about having difficult conversations. The 4D impact we just mentioned and walked through. Hope is for Advent, and a lot of churches use that this past Advent. A Venture Leader is about leadership concepts. Lenten Prayer is a book that many churches are using during this Lenten season to focus on the Lord's Prayer. We use Normalizing Next with our cohorts and coaching and consulting churches. And then the latest book resource is Faith, 4 Essential Practices. And I dedicated this book to my mother because as these books were written over the years, I would send her a copy. And she said, Olu, why don't you write a book for everybody? And I'm just thinking people love to know church stuff. And when I think about a spiritual discipline, the two I struggle with the most are fasting and faith. And so this book, Faith, 4 Essential Practices, is really a book written for everyone. And you can go to olubrown.com and find out more information. Well, I wanted to reserve some time for some Q&A or some responses from folks. And as always, thank you, SBC 21, for this opportunity to teach, to share, and even to learn myself.
Just amazing, 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 amazing. And I'm sitting here writing feverishly and taking notes and, pictures and taking pictures and things of that nature. And I know that many of you have been doing the same thing. Thank you so much, Olu. We really, really appreciate the partnership that you have with SBC 21 and in all of our efforts to try to strengthen our lay and clergy leaders for doing ministry in this case differently and understanding the true impact. There are some questions, and I know that people have been dropping questions in the chat. I have a few, but I want to start off with the question that I have earlier. And if you have a question, just send it to me and I'll share it with Olu, and we'll have some time here in the next 10 minutes or so for him to go deeper in terms of where it is that you are itching. So Olu, innovation is the ability to use the best tool to get the best result. The will always be a will. What old technology or tools work for you, even when with the modern advancements?
So I always take a both and approach to technology. I remember I was coaching a clergy person in a part of Mississippi who had a 3-point charge, I believe. And what he shared during COVID was there are some of his churches and some of his members who have access to Zoom and can use Zoom. But he says, Olu, there are some of my members in some of my churches where we have to stay analog. So they would do the free conference call service and literally over the telephone with some members have an entire worship experience, a Sunday school or a Bible study. So as much as I'm for innovation and moving forward to the next version of whatever the software or the hardware is, I believe you need to mix the two. But here's the difference. Don't be held hostage to forms of technology that can't take you into the future and make that the primary because one or two people can't move into the future. I would design some special technology platforms for that small group of people, but I would still stay focused on what the technology is for the future. Mm-hmm. Sometimes churches and leaders get mixed up when they reverse it.
Right. Thank you for that. And I hope that answered your question. Olu, I know that some people are in the chat are wanting to have access to the slides, and I believe that you have given us the ability to drop that PDF in the chat. So we do have that slide, and Ashley will be dropping the presentation in the chat. And just want you to know that he is available, through your annual conference or your local church for any additional training that you may want to have. Here's another question. This has been a great presentation. Thank you for that. How do you incorporate processes of evaluation of these various issues to stay current and what is needed for the church to be effective in opening itself to be welcoming to everyone?
Yeah. So in the book, as it relates to the technology, we give you an example inventory list and some suggestions of how to work through that. There's something related to hospitality, and it doesn't only focus on hospitality, but it's a tool we call being a secret shopper. And what you can do is it can be someone who's not a part of your church. You can give them a little gift card of appreciation and give them a list of about 10 things to look at and consider. And some churches will have multiple people because they will focus on multiple areas. And that secret shopper, no one knows they're at the church to look around, to experience it, and then come back and give a certain team or a leader feedback. But they go to church. And what I would do if you have dual platform, online and in person, I would do the secret shopper in both formats. And then you can get feedback. And what they'll tell you is the greeters were very attentive or the greeters weren't attentive. The check-in for the children's area was great and awesome, or it was lacking this. Really enjoyed worship, but it was just a little bit loud. Or really enjoyed worship. Have you considered a QR code for giving? Mm-hmm. Now, when you have that secret shopper, don't give them 30 questions, just give them about 10. And you may want to have 2 or 3 who can look at multiple areas.
That's really good, Olu. That's a great point, to really have a secret shopper, because sometimes we, sit in week in and week out, and there's some small things that we might can miss. How do you deal with leadership pushback? This can be a really big issue. This is from Penelope Lee.
Yeah, it all depends on what the pushback is about, and it also depends on the person, the church, and the culture. Most of our churches are smaller, and some of those churches are family churches. And so as a leader, you've got to be very smart and wise, whether you're the key lay leader or the clergy person. On Good Friday, Jesus was crucified. You got to decide, is this hill called Calvary, or you want to live to see a new day? So the best approach I would recommend is prioritizing what's vital and what's not. And those things that are vital, working through relationships, working through conversations, working through, remember the sensitivity versus hospitality, spending time with that person to deeply understand what some therapists would say, what is this really about? Is this about the cross, or is this about something else? But you can't do that just on Sunday morning. You got to take a little bit of time getting access to people's lives, or there are other folks who know them better who can access their lives and give you some real feedback. Now, the final to that is leaders lead. Write this note. Leaders lead. And at the end of the day, if you are the leader, there are some decisions you will have to make in spite of the consequences, and not use, well, they wouldn't let me as a reason not to move certain things forward.
That was really a great answer to that question. Great question. You guys keep them coming because you have such great questions. Olu, could you comment on pastors in triple transaction settings, Hispanic, white, and Black? That would be great if you could do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Never been asked that question. That's a real multicultural setting, not knowing all of the context. One of the things that I've learned from folks who have done well in life is they are what we call lifelong learners. And I was just having breakfast with a person earlier who is very skilled in cultural competency. So not to say you don't know these things, but if you're a key leader in the church, the clergy person or lay person, this may be an opportunity to enrich yourself in cultural competency around each of these groups, whether that's somebody professionally coming in to help coach up the team, whether that's you going out to be coached up. But in addition to that, making time to have very relationally driven conversations with each of these communities. Once again, doesn't happen on Sunday. You're going to have to go to a home. You're going to have to sit across the table. You're going to have to be in these non-confrontational moments to really understand what it means to be Hispanic, what it really means to be white, what it really means to be Black. And those don't typically happen at the church meeting or on Sunday. That happens when you choose to do life with other people.
Doing life and proximity is really important, I think, for the work that we do on so many levels. Are there other questions? I will say that the work that you are doing in the partnership that we have together with SBC 21 is so critical as we try to strengthen congregations, as we try to strengthen lay leaders, as we try to strengthen especially our pastors and our leaders. And we're so grateful that God has given you the capacity and the anointing to lead in the way that you do. Dr. Bowie, did you want to have the final
Yeah.
question
Well, I just had,
as we begin to wrap up?
yeah. First of all, man, great stuff, Olu. I'm always, learning something from you, man. And it was just great, great, great presentation and just great webinar. Would you say 4D would be one of the best resources for leaders right now in the midst of this disaffiliation, disruption, transition? Would this be one of the best resources they could get from you, or what would you recommend they purchase right now?
Yeah. Well, the two resources, well, three. It is the 4D Impact, and it's also that Normalizing Next, and that's a book and a workbook. And then the latest, which is Faith. And for Normalizing Next and Faith, I partnered up with a person who's a deacon, and she's retired out of Tennessee and does a great job with curriculum. And there are questions to each chapter, and you can do it in small group or large group. But I think it speaks to core principles that we're facing now in this new normal as leaders.
Great, great. And I really want to lift that up because, as Toska said, Olu and I and SBC 21, we are forging a strong partnership to see how we can help impact and equip and empower leaders all around the country. So if you can get those resources as Olu continues to lead, and we want to see how we can come together to help not just strengthen individuals, but help churches be all that God has called them to be. So Olu, I want to get that out there so people can get those resources. And I'm looking forward, man, to partnering with you so we can continue to make a difference in this denomination that really, really needs some leadership and some direction. So thank you for your leadership, my friend. Keep doing what you're doing. And know that God has anointed you for such a time as this. So I appreciate you, man. God bless you.
So one of the things that Olu has dropped his information in there. Of course, you could get him at olubrown.com for the book, obviously, but for any coaching services that you may have. Just an amazing leader and a blessing to our connection and to our denomination. And if you have friends beyond, as we talk about with strengthening the Black church, we're not just strengthening the United Methodist Church, but we're strengthening the Black church. And so even beyond the United Methodist denomination and our connection. Here's a final question, Olu, and then I'm going to ask you if you would pray us out because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. How do you approach leaders who are afraid to lead because they don't want to offend? And for me, I know you just said leaders lead.
Lead, yeah. So a big part of being a leader is being self-aware. And so we all have moments and times and conversations at what we call in corporate America or marketplace are difficult conversations. So as you're working with these leaders, help them understand they're not on an island. You also have challenges. And if it's appropriate, you may want to give them an example of your own life when you had some difficulty having a conversation. And what that does, it normalizes the fear. And then you can walk them through why they're afraid. Are they afraid because of the person? Are they afraid because of the person's position? Are they afraid of some other reasons? And really walk with them through that process. And you may discover, and they may discover the source of that fear and then be able to lean into it. Or it may be a situation where you need to shift that leader to a new area and bring a leader in who can get some different results. But in another area, that leader just soars because they may be in the wrong place, attempting to do a goal or have a conversation that they're just not wired to have.
And I think it's important for us to really understand and know our strengths. And that's one of the things that Dr. Bowie did with the SBC 21 team is really we went through a whole strength finding process to really know where your strengths are, because everyone is a leader. You just have to find that place. I want to ask you if you would make sure, each of you, the third Thursday of every month is Leadership Forward. And so we have this free webinar resource, and you can also go back to the SBC21.org website and on YouTube. By Friday, you will have this resource, this digital resource that you can then convene a meeting with your pastors, with your team, and you can replay this. and share this information that so many people and leaders in our church could absolutely use this information. I want to encourage you to join us on the next third Thursday, which is in April, for our webinar. April is National Reentry Month, and so we'll be bringing some best practices and teachings around released, the 600,000 men and women who are released from prisons and jails every year. And so we'll be talking about how your church can really build some infrastructure to support reentry and returning citizens. So we're excited about that webinar. That's coming up again. All of them are free. They're usually during lunch at 12 noon Central Time, 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and you do a brunch on the West Coast for 10 o'clock a.m. So we're excited that you're here with us. And Pastor Olu, I'm going to ask if you would close us out, and then we will be on our way. So if you want to connect with SBC 21, just please go to our website. Scroll to the bottom of our website at sbc21.org and sign up, like, and subscribe us on YouTube, and you'll get all of this information on a monthly basis. Thank you for joining us. And Pastor Olu, just pray us out, please.
Well, God, we thank you for this opportunity for this Lunch and Learn for SBC 21, Dr. Bowie, Toska, and these wonderful leaders who do such a phenomenal job. Continue to encourage them and resource them. For each of these leaders in the churches and communities and places around the world that were represented here today, we pray that we would take the first next step, not to focus on the step that's 1,000 feet down the road, but God, give us courage and faith to take the first next step. And as we participate in Holy Week, we give you praise and glory for the power of this Easter season. Help us to continue to share it with the world. In Christ's name we pray and ask it all. Amen.
All right, Olu, you are getting a virtual standing ovation from all of us. Thank you so much. I want to thank our producer, Ashley. We appreciate your service. Thank you, Ms. Carolyn, for helping manage the chat. And Dr. Boyd, thank you for your leadership. And we look forward to seeing you all next month. Be blessed.
God bless.